TG Geeks, episode 141, October 30th, 2017. The Podcasting Vampires. Hello and welcome to another webcast from tggeeks.com, where Ben and Keith, the Two Gay Geeks, talk about all aspects of geekdom and nerdery. Sci-fi, comics, film, horror, genre, you name it, we talk about it. I am Keith Lane. We're coming to you from TG Squared Studios in lovely Phoenix, Arizona.
And I'm Ben Raggington, also coming to you from lovely Transylvania. No, I'm not. I'm coming to you from Phoenix, Arizona. I'm not Dracula. I'm not a vampire. But we have a fascinating interview about vampires, shall we say?
Yes, and those were our podcasting voices.
Yeah, podcasting voices. What's a podcasting voice?
Yeah. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But this is going to be a long episode. Because,
hang on, people.
Hang on. But it's
worth it.
Absolutely fascinating. We have the composer of Hercules versus Vampires that we saw last weekend and that we've been talking about for months on end. So hang on to your hats. Here we go. And this time on the show, we have a really super extra special treat. We have with us Patrick Morganelli, composer of Hercules versus Vampires, that was just performed at Arizona Opera.
That you audience have heard us talk about week after week after week after week after week.
We have the composer. So welcome to the show, Patrick.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's a pleasure and an honor to join you guys for a conversation.
Oh, trust me, the honor is ours, especially after we watched it. And for our audience who doesn't know, I mean, we saw it on our regular Saturday night, and then we loved it so much that we had to get tickets for the next day.
And we sat on the front row.
We sat in the front row for the Sunday matinee, and I actually liked it better.
Yeah, it was really. We gushed about it on the episode last week. So
yeah, I mean,
this is kind of
gushed.
Our follow-up. So
yeah, we're still gushing.
Yeah.
So well, thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah. So tell us, who is Patrick Morganelli, and how did you get into composing? And I know you have an interesting background. I don't know if you want to share that, but tell us who Patrick Morganelli is, and how did you get into music?
Well, that's I'll try and give you the simplified version, and if there's any particular area where you say, we would like to know more about that thing right there, we can talk about it. Basically, like most composers, I think, I've been a classical musician my whole life, specifically a pianist, and I went to school and got an undergraduate degree, and then after that, and I began working as a pianist, in my early 20s. For various reasons, I decided, I'm going to try something else for a little while here, and I ended up having a rather lengthy career in a completely unrelated field, which was unexpected. I really did think, well, I'm just going to kind of try this. Ended up sticking around for quite a long while, and the reason why I did was, when you're 14 and you're, a musician, and presumably you have teachers who are telling you, okay, you're talented enough to do this, seriously. You have a vision of what your life is going to be when you're, a grown-up.
Oh, yeah.
And you're the real thing and all of that. And then you get to be that grown-up. Grown up, when I say that, I mean like 21 or 22.
Right. You think you're grown up.
Yeah.
Yeah, you think you're grown up, and when you're 14, you think that when you're 21, you're, oh God, I'll be an adult. You know,
Yeah,
that's
30 is almost dead.
Well, but you also think that, your life is now settled. I mean, this is what you think 21, 22, okay, my life is set. This is what I'm going to be, without even any thought that anything could happen between now and then.
Sure, of course, and you just presume that, well, when I'm 21, I'm not going to feel all of this bewilderment, over my life like I do now at the age of 14. And unfortunately, you find out when you're 21, no, the bewilderment gets worse.
Yeah, it's only more.
So basically, what I did was I decided that I wanted to fly jets in the military.
Oh my!
That is such a left turn. I mean, it really is in life. I mean, that's like, wow. Okay. I mean, you said unrelated, but holy smokes. I mean, that's like in a completely different universe.
Yeah, it pretty much was. And my original intent was, I want to join the Navy and fly jets off of aircraft carriers for, a couple of years and just kind of check that out, and ended up actually having a very long career as a naval officer, doing all of that. And, and I continued, of course, during that time to love classical music and to play the piano, but, obviously my day-to-day life was, pointed in a very different direction. And then what happened was, when I was coming up on the end of that career, I was living in Washington, D.C. and working at the Pentagon. And and believe me, that's the
Pentagon?
Oh my gosh!
Oh, okay, I didn't see that one coming.
I know, and like I said, but I could. That's a whole story in itself. My experience in the Pentagon, but
definitely need to have you back on the show. Yeah,
you should write an opera about that.
Yeah. Hey, there you go.
Yeah, I'm
the Pirates of the Pentagon.
Oh, there's a title, The Pirates of the Pentagon. Yeah, that's it.
But while I was there in D.C., I got to be friends with some professional string players who were string players in the National Opera Orchestra.
Oh, wow.
And got to play chamber music with them. And, they said, you have the chops to do this. And, when they told me that, I said, I'll get out of here, because it just seemed so bizarre, the thought that I could actually go back to having a professional career. But then I got to thinking about that, and I thought, well, I'd really have to start practicing. I mean, seriously.
Right.
But then something very, very unexpected happened, because I had never really thought of being a composer per se. I really thought of myself more as an interpreter. And then one night in my neighborhood in the District of Columbia, late at night, I got involved in a street fight with a film director.
Holy moly.
And believe me, it's not actually as lurid as it sounds. It was, it was something that happened completely by accident, because please, I am not street fight guy.
Well, no, but it almost sounds like the beginning of a joke. A composer and a street film director, and a street director meet in a street. I mean, it's like, it sounds like a joke.
I know. Now, of course, at the time, I have to tell you, I was not laughing.
No, I'm sure
not.
But now I look back on it, and what happened was, he and I got to be good friends, and at a certain point he goes, look, I have a movie and I need music for it. You're a musician. Can you do the music for my movie? And I told him, I said, I really can't do that. I have no idea how that's done. I think you need a professional to do that, because my understanding is it's rather complicated. And his answer was, well, I don't have any money to hire a professional, so what do you say?
Since we just got in a fight.
Is this before or after the fight?
Or is it what caused the fight?
Or is this what caused the fight?
Well, briefly, what caused the fight, and there's a message in here for everybody who ends up drinking too much in a bar.
Oh dear!
Is that I was actually in there, and it was late at night, and I was having probably more than I should, and the bartender. One of the bartenders kind of called me over and she said, "Can you run out front and see if the other bartender needs any help?" And I was drunk enough to not question that. I'm thinking, well, I don't know, maybe he's going to get a shipment of ice or something. So I walk out front and I see the other bartender is about to get into a fight with a big, super scary looking guy. And I'm thinking, oh, she meant that kind of help. And so now it's the two of us against big, scary guy. And when I say big, scary guy, this guy looked like an offensive lineman from, I don't know, the Pittsburgh Steelers or something. And I'm thinking, well, okay, I have two choices here. I can either start crying and run away, which honestly, fellas, was looking kind of attractive. Or, if I ever want to be able to walk into this particular bar ever again, I have to kind of stand my ground and hope for the best. So I went with option B. And then a third guy stepped out of the bar. And so it's now the three of us against big, scary guy. And fortunately, at that point, it became really more, chest thumping and name calling and, all of that. But gradually, we kind of backed away from each other, could all kind of catch our breath at that point. And it turned out the third guy who stepped out of the bar was the film director.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so he and I were not actually pummeling each other.
Yeah, like you said, it's not as lurid as it sounds.
It's not.
Fortunately, because, while it was going on, I'm thinking, okay, so this is the part in the story where I go to the emergency room. Okay. So anyway, that, he convinced me to try it. So I did the best I could with it, and then on the basis of that, I got offered another film by a Washington, D.C. filmmaker, and then another film after that, and then that was right about the time that I retired from my Navy career, and so I thought, well, I guess if now I'm in the business of writing music, I need to actually go back to school and get educated and learn how professionals, in fact, do this work. And that was when I was lucky enough to get accepted into the USC Thornton School of Music, where I got a master's degree in piano performance. And once again, I was lucky enough to be accepted as a student by the great artist Daniel Pollock. And then after my master's, I did the one-year postgraduate certificate in scoring for motion pictures and television.
Far out. Wow. That's kind of interesting to do late in life. But if you're pursuing your passion, absolutely.
It's encouraging because so many people, as you said, especially when you're 14 or 15 years old, you kind of think that, oh, well, I'm 21, my life is going to be set. And this is yet an example of saying, it doesn't have to be. You could be at any stage in life and decide that you want to take take it into a completely different direction that you hadn't originally anticipated. I think that's very encouraging.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I really do believe that. There's a saying that I love. If a door opens, you walk through it. Mm-hmm. And it just so happened for me that this particular door opened, and I thought, okay, I'll walk through it, and I have to say it's turned out pretty well for me.
That's pretty cool. So flash forward to Oregon Opera.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Now, yeah. Okay. This is the thing that we've been, Keith and I have been talking about this one ever since we saw it. How did this whole thing happen? Where all of a sudden, Hercules versus the vampires. How did this come about?
Well, once again, as in so many things, at least in my life, this was something that was completely random and completely unexpected. Because quite honestly, even though I've loved opera my whole life, as a matter of fact, the very first piece of classical music I can remember hearing as a small child, that I can actually identify, was a piece of opera. And, so I've loved it my whole life. But even when I was a composer doing, film and television scores, it never occurred to me that, I should write an opera. And the way that this happened was a friend of mine who is, a tremendous film geek, and I say that with all love and respect.
Oh, absolutely. We understand.
We're
totally cool with that, yeah.
He and I were talking, and he and I both share an enthusiasm for the films of the Italian director Mario Bava.
Oh dear.
And so, yeah, I know. You mentioned that name, Mario Bava, and there's a whole range of responses.
Exactly. It's like, oh my God, to oh my God.
Yeah.
And for any of your listeners who are listening to this who are saying, who was that again? Just real briefly, Mario Bava was an Italian filmmaker from sort of like the 50s, 60s, and up through about the mid to late 70s, who was very much known for doing genre films. But and at the time, of course, they were just considered, these extremely lurid, extremely exploitation-oriented, low-budget films. But because of his incredible sense of style, his reputation, his star is on the rise these days with, I guess, what you would call cinephiles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He always was kind of a cult hero.
Well, yeah, in a way.
He still is, but
but
people are taking his films a little more seriously.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, actually, I think in the case of Bava, it's possible that maybe, as cheesy as some of his work is regarded, that maybe in some very backwards sort of way, he was ahead of his time, in a way, and maybe that's why now his work is being appreciated?
It's possible. Yeah, that's very, very possible. Not all of his work is revered.
No.
I don't think you're ever going to. I don't think you're ever going to see the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences do a lifetime achievement award to Mario Bava on the Oscars.
Well, they should.
He
was really.
He did. He did. I don't know if I'm going to say a trendsetter, but he certainly carved out his own niche.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, this friend and I were talking, and he said, "Hey, this is crazy, but I heard from, someone that there's this opera company in Portland that is looking to take a Mario Bava film and make it into an opera."
Wow.
And and of course that was attractive to me,
right?
Because I asked him, I said, well, do you know which film it is? And he said that he wasn't completely sure, but he thought it was Hercules in the Haunted World, and which is the title that this particular film was released under in the United States.
Right.
And it turned out that I had actually seen the movie. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I can track these people down. So I tracked them down, and I got on the phone with their artistic director, and she said, well, we are doing this. We're considering a number of composers for this. You're welcome to, submit material for us to consider. And so I said, okay. So I submitted the requested material, and the material they were looking for was rather extensive. And then I was just lucky enough that I was the one who got picked to do the project.
Wow, that is far out. we had wondered whether you picked the film or the film picked you, or they picked the film, or how that came about. But that's kind of interesting that they were wanting to reach out and do something different like that. I think it's just a brilliant concept and a brilliant idea.
So let's discuss.
Well,
oh, go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say that, put in a little plug for the opera company, Opera Theater Oregon.
Right.
They're a small but very adventurous opera company that have done wonderful things, above and beyond Hercules versus vampires. And for any of your listeners that are in the Portland area, I would like to put in a plug for, look them up online and go to their shows because they're wonderful.
Great.
Definitely do that.
Absolutely.
If we ever find ourselves up in Portland, we'll definitely check them out.
And besides being a wonderfully open and free city,
right.
It's great for foodies and everybody. It's a very interesting city.
It's
and I really want to go.
Quite a bohemian cultural city for the United States. So let's discuss some of the editorial aspects of this. Now, one of the things that Keith and I have seen the movie, excuse me, and one of the things that Keith immediately noticed.
It's like, they cut out the first 18 minutes that really have nothing to do with the film. So, and I thought that was, I wondered how that was going to be approached for the quote-unquote opera.
Yeah, because didn't you say that...
Because it was like, oh my God, it's like, that is so, the first 18 minutes is so tedious.
Well, but Keith, didn't you also say that the movie is roughly around an hour and a half?
Yeah.
But what we got was 75 minutes.
Right. So it was, 79 minutes, I think, is what it...
Is that what it clocked in at 79?
Yeah.
Actually, it's about 75.
Oh, is it? Okay. Maybe with the clapping and all that. Anyway.
Yes, the thunderous applause at the end. Of course. Well, that would take a few minutes.
4 minutes. Yeah,
well,
of course.
Yeah, I just thought it was brilliant, and as I said, the first part is tedious with Theseus. Couldn't resist. It's all about that relationship and with Hercules and Theseus, and it's just like it really has zero to do with the rest of the film, other than that they're buddies and they go off on this quest and blah blah blah.
But again, was there? I mean, did you have to do?
Did you just decide to do that,
the editing?
Or was that?
Yeah.
Who did the edit on the film?
The edit on the film was done by Opera Theater Oregon.
Okay.
And the reason, if I remember correctly, the reason why they made those edits was for exactly that reason, because they felt like those scenes were kind of extraneous and they had a very, very different feel to them. Right. As I'm sure you recall, a lot of those scenes that were cut out are scenes that were shot outdoors.
Right.
And because they were not shot on a stage, the lighting, the framing of the picture, the whole look and feel of it is completely different.
Yeah.
And there is some speculation that the scenes that were cut out for the opera were scenes that were not actually directed by Mario Bava.
Oh, really?
I'm not completely sure that's true, but it's possible.
Yeah, and Technicolor doesn't really do well outside. It requires very specific lighting and.
Yes, and as you saw with the scenes that are shot indoors and shot on a stage, the fact that this movie was essentially shot in the very early 1960s, the Technicolor is very, very kind of hyper saturated, so everything looks, much more vivid than it does in real life, which is. Right. I think is part of the appeal of it. You look at it and it's like, wow, that's really that's a lot of eye candy on the screen.
Exactly, and that was his whole point in doing that anyway. He loved Technicolor, so because it added this surreal element to his films that he could get with Technicolor that you can't get with other things.
So one of the other things is, did anybody who had the rights for this film? It was like the Bava estate. who had to be contacted? Did your music have to be approved? I mean, not only by the opera company, but assuming that somebody else had the rights for this, like the Bava State, did they have to sign off on what you wrote?
Well, that's actually a very, very interesting question. One of the reasons why Opera Theater Oregon decided they were going to use this particular film was they were looking around online and they found a list of films that were in public domain. And this was on that list. So they thought, oh, well, it's in public domain, so we're probably safe with this. And so that was the reason why they picked it. And also, in a city like Portland, people are not that worked up over the issue of copyright for a film that was released in 1961. It's kind of like, look, we're just doing this. We're just going to have fun with this. No harm intended. What's the issue? However, when LA Opera decided they were going to do it here in Los Angeles, that became a very, very different story, because the issue of copyright and permission in a city like LA is like, you
that's the first thing you do.
Oh yeah. I mean, as they sometimes like to say, Southern California, LA in particular, is the natural habitat of the North American spotted entertainment law attorney.
Exactly.
And as a matter of fact, contractually with LA Opera, I was required to conclusively prove, and when I say conclusively prove, I mean to the satisfaction of their legal counsel, that either the film was in fact in public domain, or that I had a license from the copyright holder that would allow me to do what I wanted to do. Well, wouldn't you know it, as we began digging into it, we found out that in fact the film is under copyright.
Oops.
Oh dear.
And don't. Oh,
don't.
Yeah.
And and then of course, I'm discussing this with LA Opera and with my attorney, and I'm thinking, well, maybe whoever owns the copyright, maybe he lives in Rome, maybe he lives in London. I mean, who knows where? And
he's in the office next door.
Well, it actually got a lot worse, because when we figured out who owns the copyright, it turned out that he was a gentleman who lived here in Los Angeles, who works in the movie business, the entertainment business, and wouldn't you know it, he himself has a law degree.
Oh dear.
Oh no.
So it's like I'm sitting there thinking, oh, this is not going well. But as then my luck turned, and I mentioned this to my attorney, and he said, oh, our firm knows him. We've worked with him before. Let me talk with him. And so he contacted the copyright owner, who turned out to be a wonderful guy who loves opera and was very, very cooperative. And we worked out a copyright royalty for him that's really very reasonable. And so the whole thing ended happily, when it could all have just gone horribly, horribly wrong.
Oh, well, that's
goodness.
wonderful. Wow.
So
wow, that leaves me breathless.
Wow,
It's like, what? I mean, who knew that so much? And unfortunately, that's the nature of the industry. I mean, we think about what we see and what we hear, and but we forget that there is so much business and so much law and legality that takes place behind the scenes, and it's so imperative that all the T's be crossed and all the I's be dotted and all of this, in order to make something just like this. I mean, which some people would consider to be a satire, and satire is allowed constitutionally, but well, to an extent.
To an extent.
Yeah, but satire.
We don't have law degrees, though.
No, we don't have law degrees, but I have heard people say that satire does fall like under the First Amendment or something like that. But at the same time, to have to, to jump through all those hoops. I mean, it really just, wow. I mean, that's really, I think that's a lesson.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it definitely is. And you're right when you say that. I believe you're correct when you say there is a provision for satirical use of material, because that's kind of how shows like Saturday Night Live and stuff get away with satirizing things. But there is I believe a legal threshold that you cross if you go too deeply into something. I mean,
Right.
If you do like 5 minutes of satire, I think you're okay with that. If you say, well, we're going to do 90 minutes, I think that gets into a different region. But the other question, of course, is what is the right thing to do?
Absolutely.
And in my opinion, and certainly in the opinion of LA Opera, the right thing to do is simply, if you can, in all possible ways, figure out who owns the copyright, contact them, honor the fact that we're using their property, work out a deal, and then everyone's happy.
Exactly.
So the other thing that we found very fascinating is, and this was discussed when we saw you last weekend, a lot of people came into this seeing this for the first time. They'd never stepped into an opera house before, and I'm thinking that a lot of them were under the impression that they were going to be, not only are they going to be seeing something that is visually outrageous, but they're going to be hearing something that is outrageous. And as we had in our conversation when we saw you last weekend, that what you wrote serious music. I mean, you approach this from a very serious standpoint. And I remember before we even heard it the first night, we were talking to Joe Spector, and he said that he thought the music was beautiful. So I was excited to hear it. And so I guess the question now becomes, what was why did you decide to approach it on this manner? I mean, I guess that's really a dumb question. But what was, when you're approaching a movie like this, a movie that you're already familiar with,
and that is campy to begin with,
and is very campy to begin with, yes. What is your thought process in how you were going to approach the kind of music you were going to write for this?
Well, those are all very good questions, and yes, you are correct. I didn't write this as a comedy, and I didn't write it to mock the film, sometimes people would look at it and they say, oh, so this is kind of like, Mystery Science Theater 3000, which I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar with, where, they would take some sort of a genre movie and essentially, make snide remarks about it that essentially say, look at how terrible this movie is. That was not my feeling at all, for a number of reasons. First of all, I'm sure that any of your listeners who are listening to this, when they hear what I'm about to say, will say, oh my God, Morganelli is delusional and needs professional help. But, I don't think it is a bad movie. It has some visual effects in it that, how to say this delicately, don't meet a certain professional standard that we expect nowadays.
Right.
Okay. But to me, some people will look at those and they say, oh my God, that's so terrible. I look at them and I think there's a charm that's in their simplicity and their directness.
Absolutely. Well, we're big Doctor Who fans and classic Who, and if you've ever watched classic Who, the effects were crap. So.
But you just take it. I mean,
and you accept it, and that's the charm about it. Exactly, like you said.
And you just accepted it being what it is.
Sure, it's like when you talk to, a young person, and they're talking about, and you start talking about, the special effects work of somebody like Ray Harryhausen, for example, and they look at, some of his great works, and they'll say, well, that doesn't look real to me. That looks phony to me. And you say the point was not to make it look real. The point was that the look of his stop motion animation has a fantastic quality to it, which is something that, you know, inspires imagination, I guess you would say.
Oh,
it's not that, okay, if you're really going to have a skeleton sword fight, this is what it would look like.
Right. I mean, it's art. I mean, I love
thought
the
it was brilliant. I mean, we're Harryhausen fans
yeah,
too.
I love his work.
You know, you're preaching to the choir here.
Yeah.
So anyway, getting back to, and of course I agree with all of that. When I was deciding which direction am I going to go with this, my feeling was I wanted to bring the same spirit to writing the opera that I believe Mario Bava brought to the making of the film. And my interpretation of that is that what he was trying to do was to make an adventure story that was emotionally rich in, you know, one way or another, and do it with extraordinarily limited resources. Which, you know, that has a lot to do with the fact that Procrustes, the rock monster, is very clearly a man in a foam rubber suit.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, but to bring that attitude to the score, so that I figured that I will write the score of the opera that way, and then audiences will bring to it whatever they want.
Right. Well, he made the film as in seriousness. He wasn't intentionally trying to be campy.
No, of
if
course
he was
not.
intentionally trying to be campy, it'd be a much different film. But he made a serious film that turned out to be campy because of the story that he chose and
Yes.
the acting and the props and the all of it, you know, combined.
Yeah,
so,
but you're right. I mean, I don't think Bava set out to make a movie that was going to be a joke. I mean, he was making something that he thought would, you know, a serious piece of work that maybe he hoped would stand the test of time.
well, and it has.
Sure.
Yeah, but not the way he expected.
Exactly. and then you've written a serious score. I mean, it would be different if you had written it as a campy score. And,
Oh,
you know,
a la
I mean,
Peter Schickele.
Yeah, but I think that it works wonderfully
Oh, I do
because
too.
the campiness of the film and the cuts that they made and some of the dialogue that's obviously changed significantly makes the whole thing work together, and it brings those funny aspects out and all of this stuff. You know, I thought it was. I loved it.
We loved
it.
I mean, so when
we're thinking about going to Nashville in January.
we're actually toying with the idea of seeing it in Nashville. So
Wonderful.
When you were putting this all together, I mean, were there some unique challenges to doing something like this as opposed to anything you had done before?
Oh, you can't even imagine. You know, the funny thing is, I was so when Opera Theater Oregon decided that, okay, you're the boy for this, so you know you got it. That decision was made in, if I remember correctly, September of 2009, and opening of the show was going to be the middle of May of 2010.
Oh wow!
And and
that's a short turnaround time.
Woo!
That's
well,
really
you know,
short.
the thing is, but the thing is that typically doing a score, a traditional score for a feature film, it takes ballpark-wise 6 to 8 weeks on average, and this was a short film, 74 minutes. So I thought, oh well, I've done plenty of feature films. This should be a snap. I was so not correct about that.
Oh boy, you never say that.
There were so many things that I didn't understand when I got involved in the project that I came to understand very, very quickly. I mean, I assumed that, well, obviously I'm going to have to do some study about how to write for the voice. That's an understatement.
Yeah.
But, you know, and fortunately I have a number of friends who are professionals in the opera business that I could go to them and get, advice. But one of the things that I didn't realize was going to be as hard as it was I had to take all of the dialogue from the movie. And when I say the dialogue, I mean the English dialogue from that particular version of the film. I had to transcribe it, so I had it all written down, and then I had to rewrite all of it into the libretto for the opera so that, first of all, it would in some way convey the original meaning of the story, that it would... I would be able to make it synchronize up to a point with the mouth movements of the actors on the screen, and most importantly, that it would be singable, because there's so much that goes into writing for the voice that involves what are the words that you're going to expect a singer to sing, and you have to be very, very aware of the dramatic flow of a particular line if you want an opera singer to be able to sing it with anything approaching expression and emotion and feeling and things like that, which if you're not going to do that, I don't know what the point would be. So that was extremely difficult to do and very challenging. And then, of course, just the sheer technicality of trying to get the score, and in particular, not just the overall score, but the vocal lines to synchronize with the mouth movements of the actors on the screen was incredibly challenging. And you can, as you all saw when both of you came and saw the show, you can only just sort of get close with it.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, because if you know about the film, that Christopher Lee spoke Italian and English in that. I mean, he actually spoke Italian, and then it wasn't even his voice that they translated into English.
Yeah, so somebody else dubbed it.
To see him, you can tell, and Reg Parker, I think, only spoke English in the film.
But you have but many of the other characters, they're speaking, or at least they're clearly dialoguing in Italian. So obviously there's a challenge there.
That was a challenge.
So there is some challenge to definitely try to get your singers to be synced up with what they're seeing on the screen. Obviously that must have been enormously difficult.
Yes, it really was. And of course, making that, the other thing, of course, is you in doing so, if you try and get it too tight, like rhythmically tight, and you do it by using all kinds of strange meters and changing the tempo every other measure and stuff like that, you might be able to get it 5% tighter, but then you end up with a score that really is not performable even by professionals, because typically you don't get a lot of rehearsal time, so you have to. I had to make a lot of decisions about, okay, so what is going to be a performable score? The thing that worked in my favor, and once again, this is further proof that I'm an incredibly lucky individual, is what I have found, because now that Hercules has been produced a number of times, is that if the singing is close enough to the mouth movements on the screen, if the audience can become invested in the story and in the characters, their mind will tend to tighten it up a little bit for them, and people sort of will get it naturally, and they'll fill in that last little 3 to 4% of accuracy, and it becomes hopefully satisfying.
Yeah, we're accustomed to watching foreign films anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Sure. Yeah.
No, but it's right up there with watching an opera, a classic opera, and you're seeing the subtitles while it's being played. But if you allow yourself to get, as you said, invested into it, eventually you reach a point where, on some subconscious level, you're now understanding everything that's being said without thinking, that you're reading subtitles. So I'd imagine it's got to be the same way.
So let me ask a question about the orchestra and the what's the word I'm looking for?
What, like voicing or arrangements or what?
Yeah, the arrangement. Did you do the arrangement for the orchestra, or did you just do the piano score?
Oh no, I did the whole thing.
Oh, you did. Okay, cool.
Impressive.
Because I noticed that the orchestra was an odd mix. There was no flute that I noticed.
No, I saw one clarinet. The only brass that I saw were like 2 French horns, lots of strings.
There are actually 3 horns.
Okay,
yeah.
and lots of strings.
Yeah, and three violas, 1 cello, and 1 bass, was it?
Yeah, and 2 percussions, I think.
Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting.
Well, and thank you for your kind remarks about the orchestration of the thing. There were 2 things that drove the orchestration decisions. The first and foremost were the financial limitations of the production. If it was up to me, of course, I would want a bigger orchestra.
60-piece orchestra.
Oh, no kidding. Go Wagnerian.
Well, sure. I mean, I think any composer would want that because, if you get the full orchestra, you can go, there are many coloristic type things you can do with the music. But, there is a, what am I trying to say? Budgetary considerations in professional opera and symphonic music are very real things, and these are the things that the leadership of the organization have to take into consideration and say, well, okay, you can have this many instruments and that many only. You can tell us which instruments you want, but you get, in the case of Hercules, 26 players in the orchestra. And so, I had to figure out, okay, so if I get 26 players, what are the players that I want, and how am I going to use them? And then, that became sort of a decision there. The other consideration that in the case of Hercules is an important one, though was not the most important one, is that as you all saw, the in performance, you have the movie screen, a 60-foot wide movie screen where the film is projected, and directly underneath it we have the cast that are, essentially doing it as they would like an oratorio. They're all dressed in black. They have the score in front of them. They aren't in costume or anything. And then in front of, and they're on like a low riser, and then in front of them is the orchestra and the conductor. And the issue with that is that when you have that big of an orchestra, in between the singers and the audience, there's a little bit of an issue with projection over the orchestra. Yeah. If you put the orchestra down in a pit, it's different.
Well, that's an interesting point. Yeah. Because I was wondering why. Go ahead, please.
No, just in general, that becomes a consideration, and in that regard, I think it's good that financially I was limited to 26 players, because if I had 60 players up there, honestly, that probably would have been a catastrophe, and it would have made me look like an idiot.
Okay, so now I did notice that when we saw it Saturday night, how yes, I saw the orchestra was at floor level, and I thought that was an interesting technique. Is there some sort of a reason behind it? Because on Sunday I spoke to the conductor, and he said that he felt that Saturday night was a catastrophe because they had never rehearsed in the hall, so they played too loudly, and he knew that going into Sunday they were going to really tone it down. But is there some reason as to why the orchestra would need to be at that kind of level? As opposed to being normally sunk into a pit like they usually are for most operas.
Well, possibly to get the fullness of sound with the 26 players is still a relatively small ensemble. I mean, typically, like, if you go to see Don Giovanni or, Marriage of Figaro, Barber of Seville, something like that, you're going to be dealing with an orchestra of about 35 to 40 players, something like that. So 26 players is still a little on the small side. So if you raise them up a little bit, you get a little more sound out of them. But anytime you're dealing with live performance, where you're going from one venue to another, one hall to another, there's always an adjustment that has to be made. And Sean Galvin, the conductor, who is a terrific conductor that I have the greatest respect for, who has actually now conducted Hercules in 2 different productions. Certainly it would have been ideal if after performing it in Tucson at the Fox Theater down there, which is also a great theater, we could have had a rehearsal in the Symphony Hall in Phoenix. That would have been ideal, because then, we can make adjustments. But that just was not in the cards, because once again, that gets into financial considerations and all that. So you work with it, you make adjustments, and there you go.
Yeah, I thought the score was wonderful, and the Sunday performance we sat on the front row, and I thought it was interesting that the first and second violins were on the left of the conductor, and then the 3 violas were right there on the right. I mean, that's not an unusual place to put them, but normally it's first and second violins are on the front, and then violas and cellos are kind of in the middle. And I played viola for 10 years, so and I was able to hear them play, and I got up and I said to them, of the 10 years that I played viola, I never appreciated what we ever did, but to hear what you wrote for them and what they did, it gave me a whole new appreciation for the music that the violas play. And of course, always live for that viola moment that is this soaring thing, that's about 5 seconds long. And the rest of the time you're doing the pa-pas.
Right, pardon the pun, but many times the violas do have to play second fiddle to the violin.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, I had to say that.
Bump.
Yeah. Thank you, I'll be here all week.
Yeah, but
I'm glad that that worked out well, and I do in general think that the viola is an underappreciated instrument.
Oh, it's a beautiful instrument. It really is. And I said that, and all 3 of them, their faces lit up. And,
oh yeah,
big smiles.
Well, yeah, they don't get the appreciation. The violists don't get the love that they deserve. In fact, I would say that for just about any instrumentalist. Aside from the popular lead instruments, the trumpet, sometimes the flute, and the violins. First violin, second violins. I mean, they're the ones who always get the love.
Yeah. So yeah, and it was interesting. I heard some nuances in the music sitting in the front row there that we didn't hear. Of course, our seats are we're way back under the balcony,
under the sound drop,
and just because we're cheap. But we're probably going to increase our seats next year.
Yeah, but it was a joy to hear it in the front row.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh man, I heard texture and lines that sort of got lost, and I don't think it's necessarily the arrangement. I think it's just because of where we were sitting Saturday night that we were acoustically we were in a bad spot.
Yeah.
So a lot of stuff got lost, but hearing it in the front row, it just had new life to it.
Yeah, I mean we could hear it. It just wasn't as clear as obviously sitting on the front row. You hear everything.
Well, that's and that's true in pretty much any concert hall anywhere. That even some of the really great concert halls of the world, there can be very substantial differences from one seat in the hall to another in a different location, and that is part of the nature of going to hear music played live.
Absolutely. So,
well, I guess now, so where's Hercules going? I mean, we talked a little bit earlier about how we're looking at seeing it in Nashville. I mean, is it now? Is it kind of getting its second wind in terms of recognition and performance?
Because it's only been done. It was done in Oregon and in North Carolina,
I think,
and L.A. and then here.
So we're the fourth place.
Yes. And also one footnote to that version that was performed in Portland, that was very substantially different from the version that you heard that was done in LA and that you heard in Arizona. And the reason for that is that when LA decided to do it, they said, well, we will give you a bigger orchestra, because the orchestra I had in Portland was 14 players.
Oh, wow.
LA said we will go as high as 26. So I went in and made some substantial revisions to the score to take advantage of that orchestra. But you're right. I'm incredibly lucky that Hercules seems to have a life to it. You know, for a composer to get an opera performed by a professional opera company even once, that is an incredible stroke of good fortune. But to get it performed more than once is, you know, that's like, I don't know, it's like winning the music lottery or something. And, you know, to get to hear it performed by different professional organizations, you learn a lot about the work. And in terms of where it's going next, as you pointed out, this coming January, Nashville Opera is producing it, and I'm very much looking forward to that. And then we have, when I say we, I mean my agent and I, who, as a result of the LA production, I now have an agent. And
you have people.
That's part of living in LA and producing something in LA.
Yeah, and now anytime anybody wants to do, your people can talk to my people.
Oh yeah, I got people. Don't worry about that.
No people.
I have both an agent and a publicist.
Oh my gosh!
Outstanding.
So you were going to say that there's something else.
Yeah,
in the,
you and
in
your
the works?
agent.
Yes.
Yeah, we're there are definitely interest in Hercules seems to be increasing, not decreasing.
Yay.
Good.
Which I'm thrilled about that, and also we're starting to move in the direction of international bookings for Hercules.
Wow,
fantastic!
That would be great. So I just want to say that this was kind of a mission of the Spark group here at Arizona Opera to bring opera to people that may not have been exposed to opera before. Mm-hmm. And I just think that it was a brilliant, brilliant idea to do this. And we encouraged Arizona Opera to seek out Phoenix Comic-Con because, it's genre and horror and everything else combined there. And they had a wonderful booth. And we talked to a number of people after the performance on Sunday, Saturday and Sunday, that had picked up tickets at
solely
Phoenix
because
Comic-Con.
of Comic-Con.
Exactly. And the one guy, one of them was a friend of ours, and he had never been to an opera before, and he said it was one of the most incredible experiences that he had ever had in his life. Mm-hmm. And
she said it was the best experience he'd ever had in his life, or the most epic, wondrous. I mean, but he used all these positive superlatives to describe it.
He's a Mario Bava fan, and I mean that's why he came to the thing, and all of this, but never been to an opera before. Same with the other gentleman that we talked to. He said, "Oh my gosh, I may actually have to see what other operas are being performed and experience something that's more mainstream." And I thought this is a great way to introduce people, and I thought it was you get the horror fans to come and watch this thing because it's like watching the film with a film score, but the dialogue is sung. Yeah. So it's wonderful.
And something that I thought was really interesting also. And I saw this on Saturday night. I was just passed by one of the tables that was set up in the lobby, and someone had a copy of I don't know if it's a monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly, I don't know what it is, but it's some sort of international opera magazine, and Arizona Opera was mentioned, and this production of Hercules was mentioned. I mean, we're in the back of the magazine, okay, fine, but we're still mentioned, and Hercules versus the Vampires was the feature in that particular article.
So I didn't know that, but that's amazing.
Yeah, so that just I find that to be terribly exciting, and that this is. I mean, do you think we might be seeing a possible wave of the future?
You mean of interest in Hercules versus vampires?
Well, that, but also maybe hybrids.
Yeah, doing more hybrid work like that.
Well, I'll tell you. Many people have asked me, well, are you going to do another thing like this? A film synchronization opera, and my feeling about that is that, it of course would depend on the individual project. I mean, if you were going to try and do it with a mainstream film, something with big stars in it, something, a well-known film, if you could find the right film that would have, the right artistic qualities to it, and that, where an audience would be interested in actually seeing it, then you have to deal with permissions. And for a mainstream film, it isn't just who owns the copyright to the film, because you have separate copyrights, one for the film, the other for the script, the screenplay. Very likely has a different copyright.
And then there's the performers.
You
have to get. Yeah. And then you have to get permission from the studio, probably from the director, probably from the screenwriter, and I can only imagine, going to I don't know, Quentin Tarantino and saying, oh, by the way, I would like to take your dialogue for Pulp Fiction, which clearly you worked very, very hard to get it to be as great as it is, and it certainly is incredibly great, and say, oh, and by the way, I'm going to change this to make it singable. I'm sure that Mr. Tarantino would just love that. So,
yeah. But as you never
know, so there's that.
But as you said earlier, I mean, when Portland was looking at this, they were looking at films that were public domain. Okay, yeah. So there was a breakdown when it came to Hercules in the underworld, but still there are a lot of films out there which have kind of like been forgotten, that maybe are worthy of kind of being revisited, and maybe hybrid opera is the means by which that can happen.
Yeah, sure. I mean, sure, that's possible. And there's certainly lots of films out there that would be a good possible choice for that. But once again, you get into the issue of, with any kind of a genre film, especially if it's older than about, 20, 30 years or so, you get into the issue of determining who owns what, because then you have to deal with the legal issue. Then you also have to figure out, is there an existing print, either a film print or a digital file, that is in good enough condition that you could put it up on a big screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
and you could take like an older print that's in bad shape, and you could have it digitally restored. But now you're talking about investing somewhere in the vicinity of $50,000 to $80,000.
Oh yeah, it's not cheap
to have that done. Yeah, so there are a lot of speed bumps you have to get over.
Yeah,
but it's suffice to say, it's safe to say that if the opportunity presented itself and all the pieces fell in the right places, that you wouldn't necessarily be opposed to doing another one?
Oh, that's certainly true. I mean, if all of the variables, were pointing in the direction of, this is a good idea, oh, absolutely, I would consider it. I actually thought about that and came up with a couple of different ideas for films that I thought would be good for that, but like we were just discussing, there are so many things that would have to line up correctly,
right.
that I don't know that I would want to do it unless it was a commissioned work. But sure, if everyone was nodding yes at the same time, absolutely, yeah.
That's cool.
Fantastic.
So I know that you were here in Arizona for both performances, the ones in Tucson and then those in Phoenix. So you kind of had a vacation to the sunny Arizona. How was that? How was that for you?
Coming to
I
this
love
state?
Arizona.
Cool. And
Absolutely. Go ahead.
No, I was coughing. Sorry.
It just
okay.
and then so you spent time with the folks at Arizona Opera, and I assume got to know them well.
Oh yeah, and Arizona Opera is a wonderful organization. You mentioned Joe Spector earlier, who is the CEO and general director. He is a great guy, and all of the people who work there. Ashley Parks, who's wonderful, Zach Hayhurst. I wish I could mention everyone.
Oh, yeah.
Those are some of the folks that I dealt with the most closely, and they are as an organization are really committed to producing really high quality opera, and it was just a joy to work with them.
Wonderful.
And Arizona as a place is a place that I really like. I've been to a bunch of times, and the audiences that we had there in Arizona were fantastic. They were really, really into the story and into the characters, which for a composer for a thing like this is great because you never really know if anyone's paying attention.
Exactly.
It's like they're playing something that you worked very hard to try and make it not terrible, and you always wonder. Is everyone out there, are they texting? Are they thinking, do I want Chinese food? Or do I want Mexican food?
What are we going to do afterwards?
So,
I wonder how soon this is going to be over.
Oh, God.
Exactly.
Well, that's the
I
worst
need
thing.
a drink.
Yeah, when they start looking at their watch. So
so it was wonderful being there,
Right.
Not just in Arizona with the audiences here, but also definitely with Arizona Opera.
Yeah, Joe's a great guy,
Oh, he's
and
fantastic.
I think that his sensibilities and his background really are going to do wonderful things for Arizona Opera.
So clearly
I agree.
You're not just resting on your laurels regarding Hercules versus the Vampires. Obviously, you must have other projects that you are currently working on. What's coming up in the future for you in terms of what you're doing?
Well, even as we speak, I'm here in my studio in Los Angeles, and I'm working on a violin concerto, which, for somebody who is not a violinist, there's a whole lot of study that is involved with trying to write a violin concerto that is not completely terrible.
I hadn't even thought of that.
The two things I have going for me. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, it never even dawned on me about someone writing a concerto for a particular piece of music who doesn't play that instrument. It just never occurred to me before. That's got to be a very unique challenge.
Well, that I take solace in the realization that most of the great violin concertos in the violin repertoire were written by composers who were themselves not virtuoso violinists.
With the exception of Paganini.
Well, sure. You have Paganini, and then you have all the works that Pablo de Sarasate wrote, and all of those wonderful things. But then again, Tchaikovsky was not a virtuoso violinist. Johannes Brahms. Not that I'm comparing myself to them, but you look at the incredible solo violin music that Bela Bartok wrote.
Right.
And he was a pianist. He was not a virtuoso violinist. But it also involves really, really studying the instruments, studying the literature, and then having friends who are virtuoso violinists to where you can take something to them and say, what do you think about this? And after they get through laughing at you, then you make adjustments. But anyway, so I'm writing that for a violinist, my dear friend Zi Chen, who is a violinist in Washington D.C. And then I have two operas in development, and we're hoping to get a commission to write one or the other, or maybe even both of them, in the near future. But right now they're still under development.
Oh, great.
Fantastic. So, wow. We have been talking for over an hour.
That's amazing.
This has been, it's
been incredible.
This has been one of the greatest conversations we've had in a long, long time. I can't thank you enough, Patrick. So, for anybody who wants to know more about what you're working on, upcoming projects, possibly even, upcoming performances of Hercules versus the Vampires, is there any presence on the intertubes, social media, websites? How can people find out more about you?
Well, I would direct them to my website, which is simply patrickmorganelli.com, and where they can, learn a little bit about me, and they can hear samples of other work. And, there are some recordings there from Hercules. There's also the websites for some of the opera companies that have produced it. Arizona, LA Opera. I'm not sure if North Carolina Opera still has the material up on their website, but you can look at those. If anyone wants to contact me, you can certainly send me email through my website. And one humorous, I think, story regarding that. After the run of the show in L.A., I received quite a bit of email at my website, and one in particular really tickled me. A gentleman sent me an email, and he said, this past weekend, my girlfriend and I and my two cousins went to see Hercules versus Vampires at the Los Angeles Music Center. I really loved it. I think I would have loved it even if I hadn't been high on mushrooms.
Oh, my God.
Wow. That is just awesome.
So, do you have Twitter or Facebook or presence in other places on social media?
I don't. I used to be on Facebook, but then it just seemed so odd to me, where I kept getting friend requests from people that I didn't know, that I had no clear connection with. So at a certain point, I just kind of said, there are so many things in my life that freak me out that I have no control over, but I can say no to this.
Right.
Well, there it is then.
Well, that's good. Then. Yeah, everybody go to patrickmorganelli.com. And well, thank you so much for being with us this time on the show. This was fascinating conversation.
This was fun.
Thank you so much.
This was so much fun. What a joy it was to talk to you today.
Well, likewise, gentlemen, I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope we can do this again in the future sometime.
Yes, as you're getting ready to release another or premiere a new piece of work, we'll be happy to talk to you again.
Thank you.
Great. I'll look forward to it.
All right. Thank you so much.
This is Patrick Morganelli, composer of Hercules versus Vampires, and I am a guest today on the show of the Two Gay Geeks.
Normally we would talk about that. I want to talk about that. That was a fascinating interview.
It
was a conversation.
It was. That's
really
what
was.
Those are the kind of conversations that I live for.
Yeah,
it was fantastic. He was so engaging and had such fascinating things to tell.
Yeah, and I hope that you, our listeners, enjoyed that as
much as we enjoyed having the conversation.
We really geeked out about that.
It was so enjoyable.
It was great. So here's a few selected birthdays for October 30th through November 5th, 2017. October 30th, Grace Slick.
Of Jefferson Airplane / Starship.
Yeah. Also, Henry Winkler and John Adams.
Probably my favorite. Are we talking the founding father, or are we talking the composer?
We're talking about founding father.
Oh, thank God.
President
One of my
John.
favorite people.
Yes. Also, on October 30th is Mario Ortiz. Works on the project Beyond the Impact. And a filmmaker of ours over in Japan, Pablo Absento. October 31st, Peter Jackson. Michael Collins, the astronaut. He was the one that navigated the lunar module.
Okay.
Also, moving right along,
Please.
Johannes Vermeer, born in 1632. He was a Dutch master, one of the Dutch masters. He was a Dutch painter.
Okay.
That's just why he got on the list. So, November 1st, Mr. Tim Cook of Apple fame.
Just in time to push out the Apple X.
Yeah, the Apple X, yes. Also on November 1st, Peter Ostrom.
Who will soon be coming to Phoenix Comic-Con Fan Fest.
Fan Fest, yeah. So, also as the birthday of a fictional character, Speed Cameron.
He's an Arizona superhero.
He is an Arizona superhero.
Who looks like a Speed Camera.
Yeah, and he's written and drawn by our friend Russ Kazmierczak. November 2nd, Ray Walston and Steve Ditko, another comic book artist.
Right.
Also Marie Antoinette and Daniel Boone, and they were contemporaries.
Were they?
Yeah. I mean, they probably didn't know each other, but they were contemporaries. They lived, there was a period of time that they were both alive together at the same time. So,
okay.
Not alive together, but they were both alive at the same time. There we go.
Let's move on.
Okay.
Before
November 3rd. Before we make it worse. Yeah. November 3rd, Dolph Lundgren, Charles Bronson, and John Barry. We were just talking about him on Friday night. He's the composer, John Barry.
Okay, the composer, John Barry,
Yeah.
not the production designer, John
No,
Barry.
no,
Two
no.
different people.
Yeah. Also on November 3rd, Vincenzo Bellini, another opera composer, born in 1801. November 4th, Ralph Macchio.
Who still looks like he's 12.
Yep. Doris Roberts and Loretta Swit.
Oh, my goodness.
She will be 80.
Wow.
Hot Lips Houlihan is going to be
right.
80.
Wow.
Oh, my God. Also on November 4th, Will Rogers was born in 1879 in Oologah, Indian Territory, near the city of Oologah, Oklahoma.
I was going to say that's got to be Oklahoma.
Yep. It was Indian Territory at that time. November 5th, Vivian Lee was born, and she was Gone with the Wind. She was Scarlett O'Hara.
That's right.
Also, Roy Rogers, Tilda Swinton, and Art Garfunkel, all on November 5th. Also, November 5th is famous for being Guy Fawkes Day.
Remember the
5th of November, the gunpowder treason and plot. I know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. Thank you, V. And it was a perfect place to stop it because the music ended perfectly.
Right.
Dang it. And that's it for the
perfect
birthdays.
moment ruined.
Yeah. Leave it to me.
Another thing not to do.
Exactly. We'll talk about that.
Hi, my name is Joe Hogan, and I'm a geek. And if you're currently listening to this, there's a good chance you're a geek too. So check out my podcast, Geektitude. Each week, I talk with somebody about their geek aptitude. Sometimes I talk to people in a geeky profession. Sometimes it's someone doing something really cool with their geekiness. Often it's another geeky podcaster. But it's always someone who wants to share their inner geek. So join me each week as we come together to geek out about all the geeky stuff we love. And remember, this week, keep it geek.
Head on over to Geektitude and listen to our friend Joe Hogan, who we just saw this weekend.
Yeah, I just saw him the other day.
Yeah, at the Podcaster Yourself. So now it is time for What's that music mean?
Feedback.
Feedback.
But very little feedback.
Oh.
Very, very little feedback today. We only have one article, one little comment. And we've mentioned how we have some new people who are contributing their movie reviews to our website at tggeeks.com. And one who's just been really crazy in giving us stuff is Ro.
Yay!
Oh, she's
thank
amazing.
you so much. You have done wonders for us.
Wonders.
Thank you so
We
much.
can't thank you enough, Ro. And she did a review for a movie called The Snowman. And I would just simply point people, go take a look at it. And, Ro, thank you for reviewing the movie because now I know whether I need to see it or not.
Yeah.
Now,
exactly.
I will say this, that we did get feedback on our website from someone named Carla, and she's basically echoing what my thought was after I read the review. And she says, "Thank you for saving me time. I'll never get back and money I can spend elsewhere, like on the books."
Yeah.
So that tells me, okay, I think I will spend my money elsewhere.
Yeah. There is one other little bit of feedback, and actually from Ro herself. I shared her Suburbicon review that she released this morning, and I said, "Here's Ro's review." So, and thank you, and blah blah blah, and shared it, and then she commented and said, "I was a little testy, just a little testy."
Was she?
So, that little feedback there. So
well,
I think that's it for the feedback.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, baby. They're like two gay geeks. They're together, They're two gay guys and they're geeks. Is that okay?
Well, I forgot to say the usual thing about the comments. You can comment on our Facebook page. You can comment on our website, on any of the articles and or the episodes that we do. You can comment on YouTube. You can even leave us voicemail at 469 TG Geeks. That is 469-844-3357.
I just thought we weren't doing that
anymore. And remember, no, we have to. It's in the script.
Oh,
we talked about it yesterday. Yeah.
Well, they have to say now.
Please play nice.
I just thought we weren't doing it anymore since you went right to the music.
I you know me.
Okay.
A shiny object.
And speaking of shiny objects, we had one heck of a shiny object yesterday.
Yeah.
We've been really building up to this one for some time now.
Yeah, the podcast
Podcast yourself.
PIY 2017. Yeah, and that.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Oh, it was tons of fun.
It was in conjunction with the release of Podcasting for Dummies, 3rd edition by T. Morris and our friend Chuck Tomasi. Well, both of them are friends now, but we've been friends with Chuck longer than T.
Yeah.
And it was really fascinating. I got to do a panel on what not to do, and some of the things that I've done today are things not to do.
And yesterday.
And yesterday.
I wasn't going to bring that up, but I only do because there's a very humorous sense of irony about that.
Oh, yeah. The very first bullet point was check your equipment and make sure your microphones are working. Yet I was supposed to record some of the sessions, and I did not do that on my mobile recording device. So, oops. Chalk it up to me again. I'm making all the mistakes so you don't have to.
You're making all the mistakes so that people can have books to write.
Exactly.
Is that it?
Yeah.
You're trying to give the material. But it's not all you.
Yeah.
It's not all you. We found the most amusing editorial error in the book.
Oh, no, we're not even going to talk about that.
Not going to talk about that?
Not going to talk about that. But we are mentioned in the book, I think, page 72 and
a
page
couple of times.
342.
We're brought up a couple of times
and
there, yeah.
It is a great book if you have any interest in podcasting or want to know more about podcasting or want to be a podcaster yourself.
But it wasn't, it's excuse me, it's not just that, but it's also for people who are experienced podcasters. I heard some interesting things yesterday that was some very good food for thought. When you're podcasting on a regular basis, you can, and we both do this, you tend to lose perspective.
Yeah.
And we heard things yesterday that are great reminders on putting things back into perspective and preventing yourself from, getting what is referred to as pod sanity.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah,
it was a fantastic experience. I mean, I'm really glad we did it. There's already talk about doing it again next year, possibly on the East Coast.
And there was the Legends of Podcasting, Michael Manigay and several other, Chuck Tomasi and
Jack
Mangan, who were friends with all these people, and they did that. And we actually have 2 copies, signed copies of Podcasting for Dummies. We will be giving those away on future shows, so please
think about it.
Please keep listening. We'll have some kind of contest or some damn something that will figure out how to get give them away,
hands,
so, and get them into your hands. And I think that's it. And I think you have an opinion that you're going to share with you. So I'm going to play our op-ed intro music.
So, just watched the latest episode of the Orville, and for anybody who doesn't know, and we've said some, for the most part, some pretty positive things about the show. This latest episode they had was Majority Rule, and for anybody who doesn't know the story, 4 of our crew members of the Orville come down to this planet, which is equivalent to 21st century Earth, to search for a couple of anthropologists that have been lost there. And it's a planet that is ruled by social media and public opinion, the court of public opinion. And one of the crew members, John Lamar, he behaves in a manner that is less than, let's just say it was offensive. He behaved offensively. And as a result of that, like a teenage boy. And as a result, he is now the victim of this court of public opinion through their social media system, and is close to being lobotomized. So, having said that, I think the concept for this episode was a good one. I did not care the slightest bit for the execution. John's behavior was so beyond the pale for me, I actually found it offensive. Now, it is possible that this was supposed to be the point of the episode. Nonetheless, I feel the message could have been delivered much more effectively with something that came off as perhaps a bit more innocuous by our own standards, but clearly offensive to the people on this planet, such as maybe the hat that Alara was wearing. Instead, by going with John's very juvenile antics throughout the entire episode, and it wasn't just the thing that got him in trouble, but he kept behaving in a very juvenile and sophomoric manner throughout the entire story, it felt like that it was pandering to a very inaccurate, stereotypical behavior. Besides, what does this say about a crew member of a Union ship who has absolutely zero sense of cultural decorum? Even after he gets busted for his initial act, he still behaves in a juvenile manner. Now again, I thought the story was a great concept about the nature of social media and public opinion, the court of public opinion. But it was a very, very poor execution of this idea. Yes, I know that on Facebook, of social media of all places, my opinion is in the minority. I would like to know what all of you think. Thank you very much.
Up next time, who knows what we're going to have? We may have another interview or a conversation with somebody.
Some of these things, we said this before many times, these things just fall in our laps. The interview with Patrick fell in our laps. We missed something on the script.
Yeah, we did. I shouldn't have played that yet. I'm way out of it. I'm just thinking about that conversation with Patrick, because we just recorded that just before recording this, and it just was just fascinating.
It was amazing.
It really
was.
The
interview with Patrick, it was absolutely amazing. Yeah. And I just hope that, for all of you who are listening to it, that you get as much enjoyment out of it as we did.
Yeah. So obviously we have our follow-up items. Check our calendar. We got all kinds of stuff on there. Phoenix Comic-Con Fan Fest is November 11th and 12th, which would be, 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
And lots of people there. Check out myfanfest.com for more info. And Phoenix Comic-Con is May 24th through 27th, 2018. More info after FanFest. We will be in Los Angeles at the Guadalajara Film Festival in L.A. on November 3rd for a screening of Morning After.
And possibly other places while we're down there, too. You never know.
November 4th is the independent, I can't remember the name of that film festival, but we will be there the 3rd and the 4th and be in L.A. And then we're going to be at FanFest on 11th or 12th. And we'll have more sightings of us.
Oh, I'm sure.
Elsewhere.
Yeah.
And, of course, everybody knows we're huge supporters of independent creators, filmmakers, comic book artists, writers, etc. If they're doing a crowdfunding campaign, please consider supporting them. You can get involved for as little as $1. You never know. You might be part of something big.
Special thanks to Doctor Who Talking Who on Twitter, as well as the Human Arkle on Twitter. Doctor Who Talking Who publishes the Doctor Who Fancast Guide. The Human Arkle publishes the Arkle Times Post Dispatch News. They both republish our content on a regular basis. We thank them for that. You can find the Fancast Guide by going to Twitter, looking for @TalkingWho. You can find the Arkle Times Post Dispatch News by going to Twitter and finding @Arkle, who also, by the way, has a presence on Tumblr with the Incorrect Star Trek Voyager quotes. Check it out. It's great fun. Just make sure your boss doesn't see you doing it.
Yep. And we want to give a shout out to The Lookie Show on YouTube. It's Lookie Show, and you can check them out. They do a really fascinating movie reviews and TV shows in a very unique way. So check out Lookie Show on YouTube.
And finally, a great big shout out to The Gay Geek for allowing us to post our episodes on their page. The URL is facebook.com/group/The Gay Geek. It's a great page, great content, and they have a great moderator. His name is Jeremiah Reeves. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremiah. We want to remind you to occasionally click on our Amazon ads. We have those at the bottom of each article and episode, as well as widgets on the side. It doesn't cost anything. If you choose to buy something, use one of our search ads. We'll get a little bit of a kickback, and thank you for your consideration. And lastly, check us out on iHeartRadio, and please rate us and subscribe. Rate us and review us on iTunes, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Yes,
So,
YouTube.
YouTube. Yes, we'll talk about that later. So that's it for our episode. And that's it for TG Geeks Webcast this time. Be sure to check out the article for this webcast episode. We'll have several links on the page about things that we talked about. And remember, you can comment on our Facebook page or our website, tggeeks.com, or you can leave a voicemail at 469-TG-GEEKS. That is 469-844-3357. From TG Squared Studios, I'm Keith Lane. Thanks for listening. I bid you peace.
Cheers.